Our HR manager asked us, is there a difference in job satisfaction between people who left the organization and people who are still in the organization? Let's get started. Job satisfaction is one of the variables in this data set, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, job satisfaction. Now if we click on the data definitions and we go to job satisfaction, we see that a 1 is low and a 4 is very high. So the higher the value, the higher the job satisfaction, the more satisfied people actually are. Now, if we look at the data, there's job role, job level, hourly rate, etc., gender, we also see attrition, and we see yes and no. A number of people have left the company and a number of people stayed at the company. So that's a good variable to keep in mind. A third very relevant variable, because we want to see if job satisfaction makes a difference in the people who stayed and the people who left the company. The third variable that's relevant is years at the company. Here it is. So the total amount of years at the company, especially when people have quit. That's a good number to keep in mind because there's a big difference between someone who quit after 10 years and someone who quit after 1 or 2 years. And years at the company is also the variable that you work with if you want to, thinking back about the ROI and utility analysis module and lessons. Years at the company, when people leave within 1 year, then that's the key metrics for your utility analysis. So years at the company is an important metric. Let's try to answer the question. We insert a pivot table. For table 1, it automatically selects everything. I click OK. And we need to define whether there's a difference in job satisfaction between the people who left the organization and the people who are still in the organization. Now, how do we do this? We need to find a difference between people who are in the organization and people who left. So let's put attrition in the rows because we need to make a distinction between those two. And the value that we want to know is job satisfaction. Where is it? Job satisfaction. We put job satisfaction in values. Why? We don't want the sum of job satisfaction, but we do want the average. We click OK. And what you see is that when attrition is no, so people are still working in the company, the satisfaction is 2.7. And I'll show you it all in a slightly nicer way. 2.8. And when attrition is high, as in when people have actually left, attrition equals yes, then satisfaction was lower. So the people working in the company are happier than the people who left the company. That's a conclusion we can draw. So yes, there's absolutely a difference. Now, the question the HR manager asks us is there a real difference? So can we see if this is a statistically significant difference? The only way to find out is to get all the individual employees' scores on job satisfaction and then distinguish between whether they left the company or didn't leave the company. Because we need to do independent sample t-test. In this case, we have two big samples and we want to see are there significant differences between the two on this specific variable. So we need to get all the data split out on whether people did leave or didn't leave. So in the rows we put someone's employee number. The attrition goes to the columns. So we see two columns. No, people are still working. There's no attrition, or yes, there is attrition. They left the company. And we have all the employee numbers. And that's interesting. And then the values is it doesn't really matter whether it's the average or the sum. It's just the number that's displayed on job satisfaction for all these individual employees. So now you see there's two individual groups with the people who did leave and the people who didn't leave. Using this data, we can actually see whether there's a statistically significant difference. And we do that again by going to the data analysis box. I click outside of the pivot table. And in this case, we're looking at a t-test. We want to see if the variables significantly differ from each other. So we have a two-sample t-test.
If I briefly pause this video, in this example you see me selecting a t-test that assumes equal variance. Now the question about equal variance is an important one. When do you assume equal variance between two groups and when do you assume unequal variance? The best answer is to do Levene's test of equality of variance. The null hypothesis in this test assumes equal variance, and if that's disproven, then you can assume unequal variance. But for day-to-day use, if groups are of similar size, then you can almost always safely assume equal variance. If groups are not the same size, just like in this example, where we have more people that stay than people who are leaving, then you shouldn't assume equal variance and you should go for unequal variance. In the example, I show you how to do this for groups with equal variance. If you would do this for yourself, assume unequal variance. In the end, the results won't really differ much because everything, and this is a spoiler, will be highly significant. But if you do this exercise yourself, and I encourage you to do it yourself, assume unequal variance because the groups are different. And if you have SPSS on your computer, then try Levene's test for equal variance.
We need to select the data. Yes, there are labels. Data range 1 is over here. I'll drag it down all the way to 1400 something. Careful not to take the grand total with you, that will disrupt your data. And then there's the second row, the no row. I'll go from the bottom to the top. Select this data as well, including the top label. So those are the people who actually did leave. I want an alpha of 5%. I click OK. And now we get the outcome of the two-sample t-test. And what do we see? We see that no, so the people who didn't leave, and the people who did leave. So we have the leavers, so to say, and the non-leavers, just for clarity. The non-leavers have a mean of 2.77. The leavers have a mean of 2.46. That's something we already saw. Now, if we look at the significance, and it's written down in a scientific notation, so we go to home and we make it a normal number, then it's a really, really small number. If I add a bunch of extra numbers behind the comma, then you see that it's very, very highly significant if we test one tilt. So if we actually have the assumption that leavers are less satisfied compared to non-leavers, and if we don't have an assumption yet, then you test two tilt. It's still very, very, very significant. So what you see is that there is indeed a highly significant difference in job satisfaction between the people who left and the people who didn't leave. However, there's still a problem in this analysis because when we go back to the table, we have selected literally everyone. So the people who are working in the company, and I'll scroll to the right, the people who are working in the company for 0 years or for just 1 year are also counted in this analysis. And those are people who basically never really had the chance to quit or to think about it. So if you say, hey, that's not a really relevant, usually people stay in the job for 1 or 2 years because they don't want to appear like a job hopper. So the people with 1 or 2 years in the specific job are very unlikely to leave the organization after they've survived the first 6 or 7 months. So as an extra variable, you can add the years with the current company, years at the company. If you put that in a filter and you say, hey, I want to select everyone except the people who stayed at the company for 0, 1 and 2 years, and then I click OK, you actually get a different data set where you can do your analysis once again. Two sample test. The range is still in memory. However, we go all the way to 1132. So 1132, about 300 people were left out. 32. We click OK again and we get a new outcome. And you see that the mean between the people who stayed in their job and who left their job is now 2.75 and 2.44. If we compare that to the previous version, we see that there's not really that much difference. However, if we look at the significance level, we see that the level of significance has decreased quite a bit, but it's still highly significant. So even if we make the distinction between the people who only worked here for 0, 1 or 2 years, or we just select everyone, the conclusion is still there's absolutely a difference in job satisfaction between the people who left the organization and the people who are still in the organization. So that's the interesting part. Now, I would say play around with this dataset because it's an amazing dataset. Experiment with it and do select a number of hypotheses of which you think like, hey, could they actually be related? For example, someone's performance rating and someone's age, for example, or someone's performance rating and the number of years that they're in the job. And play around with that data, because the only way you really start to understand all the analyses you can do, your t-tests, your regression analysis or your correlation analysis, the only way to learn it is to really play around with it. And I would say, do that, try it. If we once again go back to our research question and to our HR manager, no, there's absolutely no correlation between time at the company and training times. And second, there's absolutely a difference in job satisfaction between people who left the organization and people who are still in the organization. That's the answer to the research question, and this is how you do it. And you now understand that working with data is, for a big part, experience. Try doing it, fail 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then get to the right conclusion, and then do it all over again.